I did not see a response.
Okay. So obviously there's a back and forth going between these two guys. And it's a true war. It's a true fight that's taking place. People are watching it firsthand on what's going on here. Adam, what are your thoughts on this story?
So, brace for impact. This is going to be the tech overlords who are going to be running our lives for the next, not 4, not 10, not 20, 40 years. Remember the tweet that Elon Musk said about Donald Trump? He goes, listen, you got him for another 3.5 years. You're going to have me for another 40 years. By the way, Sam Altman and ChatGPT and Gronk and Elon are going, this might be the tech overlords for the next 400 years. It's pretty scary.
Last Thursday, Elon Musk sued Sam Altman, the co-founder of OpenAI, that's the creator of ChatGPT, claiming that he breached his contract by pursuing profits over the public good. What is really behind this lawsuit?
I'm sympathetic to this one. Like, I think that, like, you know, abstracting away, like, I don't think he's going to win, you know? Like, I don't think that, like, there was a contract, and I think, like, the legal theory here is dubious. But I look at this as, like, not a piece of strategy or whatever. I look at it as, like, he donated tens of millions of dollars to a nonprofit that is now an $86 billion startup that's raising money and commercializing stuff for Microsoft. And he's like, well, how did that work? Like, I think that's a very reasonable complaint.
I guess on its face, the idea that a nonprofit is now like a financially very lucrative.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Andrew Thompson with West East Media, and welcome to this very special first live stream. I'll tell you how. Are you ready to rumble? It looks like Elon and Sam Altman are. And if you are as well, that's great, because we are going live for the very first time on the Rumble platform as well as YouTube, where we've been for several weeks now. So it's very exciting. So glad you're here with us. We have a great program for you tonight. You saw in the opening what it's going to all be about. It's not all about Elon versus Sam Altman, but boy, could you teach a whole law school class on fraud and a lot of other things about civil litigation and contracts from what those guys are going through and doing right now. So we're going to get into all of that. The bit of the case reality trial. I think they picked a jury April 27th, which is less than 2 weeks from now. Wow. So they are ready to rumble, and they've been through summary judgment, which means the case will either settle or go to trial, go before a jury now. And there are literally billions of dollars on the line. At one time, Elon Musk was asking for $134 billion because of feeling misled, lied to, defrauded, and frozen out more than anything of the progress of OpenAI. You know, there's a lot I think about that, and we'll get into it. And I like Elon Musk a lot, and frankly, not the biggest Sam Altman fan for some good reasons, I think. Similar to Elon's, but definitely not the same. But it's a very interesting case. It'll teach us a lot. It's instructive. It's fascinating, and you won't want to miss everything we're going to talk about tonight. But before we do, we want to get into some news. We want to give you some updates on what's going on over in Iran, the status of the war, and really now it looks like a ceasefire that is going to roll into hopefully a treaty of some sort, a settlement of the war and into the war when we can back out. But blockades, movement of ships through the Straits of Hormuz, other things, those are all going to have to be addressed there. Let's talk a little bit about the news as it's coming in right now. So the next piece we have is about Iran's nuclear. We should have had a video clip with this, but that's okay. And the first piece of news is about what's going on in Iran and the negotiations around Iran's nuclear weapons. So let's look at the next clip on that if we can. Okay. There we go. Okay, so we're missing some video links from tonight, and that's unfortunate. But we'll go back. We'll talk about what J.D. Vance established and looking at the negotiations in the Iran deal. First of all, it seems that Iran is asking for a 5-year suspension on its uranium enrichment right now, and the U.S. is demanding 20 years. Now, what I really want to talk about is what's the correct posture? What should America be doing? What is in America's best interest? And as we look at that in terms of what's in America's best interest, we need to keep focused on the realities of the situation that we're facing and who we're dealing with. If, frankly, 5 years, 20 years, no time is right for us to say, okay, Iran, go ahead and enrich uranium, because we know what can happen and probably will happen as soon as you're able to do that. And what we don't want to have happen is our sworn enemy, who calls us the great Satan and wants to see our downfall and has pushed for it for 47 years, we don't want to see them enriching uranium and bringing about a nuclear war or a nuclear holocaust upon the United States or on our allies in the Middle East. And we'll get in a little deeper on that in just a bit, because it's really important to think about who all of our allies in the Middle East really are. And we have more than we often think about, because we often think that Israel is our only ally over there. But in terms of 5 years versus 20 years, yeah, a lot can happen in 20 years. But unless what happens in those 20 years is that Iran has become unless that regime that's in power today has changed and shifted, then we can't trust them anymore 20 years from now than we can trust them today. And that's really important. But you might ask, and I've heard this question a lot, what is it our business to decide whether Iran has a nuclear weapon? I mean, come on. North Korea has a nuclear weapon. Israel has a nuclear weapon. Russia, China do. We do. So why do we get to decide if they do or not? Well, the context of what I think about is in terms of the Sun Tzu's The Art of War. And I think it's really important, written over 1,500 years ago, and very, very powerful, still used by in the military today. Nothing new. And in The Art of War, we have in The Art of War, we have conversation about, okay, we're having some technical difficulties here. You might see my laptop peering over the bottom of the screen, and that's something we haven't had lately, but we're having a real problem with that. So hopefully we can get that fixed, and anything else that's challenging us. But to stay on track with the news of the day, let's focus on what we have at hand. Sun Tzu said, if you are in power, use the power that you have. So this is the idea that we need to be focused upon, is that, look, there's two things that matter here. One is the propensity for harm, the actual threat. It is in America's interest that a country that swears to use whatever resources it has to destroy us doesn't have those resources available. That's number one. And number two is the capacity that we have to make that not possible. And we have that capacity, and we've shown that over the last 6 weeks. So that's a big thing. So this is something to think about as we go forward, is how that's that going to be handled. And from here, you know, we'll keep moving. So if we can go to the next clip. If we can go back to the where we left off. Okay, the next clip after that. Thank you. There we go. Okay, so Russia is now saying that they are prepared to take Iran's uranium. And this is a real problem, and our answer ought to simply be no to that. And we ought to get wide and unilateral support on this from both sides of our political aisle, because the Democrats have shouted that Russia is the problem, whether it's about Donald Trump or Ukraine. They've been shouting about Europe, the European Union, NATO have all been saying the threat is from Russia. Well, if we allow Iran's uranium to be turned over to Russia, what do you think they're going to use it for? And where do you think it's going to go back to? So the reality is that we're looking at a problem with Iran that we're making even greater if we allow that uranium to be sent to Russia. So this is something I think is a hard no, and it's an inevitable, forever hard no. So let's take a look at the next video if we can. We had a video. Okay. No. That's not where we're going. So let's go back to the Middle East map and talk about that for a second. Okay. This is important. So 3 things I would like for you to think about when it comes to the Middle East. And that is, first of all, the general outline. Okay, if you look at the way it's an unusual sort of jigsaw puzzle with the Mediterranean Sea and Egypt and the North Africa to the west. You've got the Arabian Peninsula on the south end of it with the Indian Ocean just below that. You've got Iran to the east. The Persian Gulf is really on the east, headed toward the southeast. That opens up to the southeast. And then right in the middle, you've got this area that includes the Levant countries, including Israel and Lebanon, as well as Iraq, which is essentially the old Babylonian Empire, while Iran was the old Persian Empire. And then above that, to the north, we have Turkey, which is, of course, was the old Ottoman Empire. And of course, that comes from much more recent times. Now, if you consider the alliances there, and they've changed over time, we've seen factors where, Egypt was a sworn enemy of the United States and Israel for a long time. No longer is that true. We working on another map to share, but if you consider the alliances in the Middle East, the Arabian Peninsula, by and large, is pretty well aligned with the United States now, as is Israel, as is Egypt, and for the most part, so is Turkey. Iraq is more or less on the fence, but is generally supportive. They are aligned with their conqueror, the United States, and Kuwait just below them as well. In the middle of the Levant, that larger sliver than Israel, but Jordan, Lebanon, the countries in between Israel and Iraq, between Israel and Iraq, and including Palestine, more or less, have made alliances with Iran. And where do those, and Syria, of course, and where do those alliances come from? Well, they've come from the proxies that Iran has created, and they've created it out of their Shiite Muslim influences. Okay. So you have in the Middle East basically a Shia population which is devoutly opposed to the United States and Israel. Their primary focus is the destruction of Israel and the destruction of those they think of as Israel's big brother, that being the United States. And I mean, they have created terrorist proxies from Hamas, the Houthis, who are down based in the lower Arabian Peninsula, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and ISIS has operated in Iraq and Syria. These forces have aligned themselves with Iran and are largely Shiite Muslims, okay? And they are very strict about Sharia law and all of the elements of Quranic Islam. The rest of the Middle East is fairly well aligned with the United States. Now, they have pretty strong alliances on the other side of the planet, for example, Saudi Arabia with China. But that said, their alliances with both countries, the United States and China, come about or mean that these countries are not that these countries are not as deeply religious as the countries aligned with Iran. Now, what else does that mean? How do I explain that? What you find, in my opinion, I say this out loud and I mean it sincerely, is that if you look at Saudi Arabia, for example, Kuwait as another example, if you look at the secular based Middle Eastern countries, Arabian countries, you find that they generally have a soft rejection of Islam and certainly of Sharia law and absolutely of Shiite Islam. Okay, well, what does that mean? It means that if you're talking with the princes of those various countries, that privately in their own homes alone with their brothers, the people they're closest to, they probably acknowledge that they don't believe it at all. Now, in America, if you're a Christian, as I am, we all know Christians who say they don't really believe what the Bible is all about or what Christianity is all about. That's sad. It's dishonest and it's dangerous, but it exists. Well, in Islam, because they are denying a violent, repressive religious order, it's actually for the good in that it means that they can create alliances with us and they can open up to many of the freedoms that we hold dear as Americans. And that is beginning to happen and has been happening over the course of about the last 30 years, especially from the Arabian Peninsula northward. Okay. So those alliances mean more and they're more solid for us than we probably have recognized. And I want to think about that deeply. Yes, there's things that we've seen happen come out of Saudi Arabia. There's things in the other parts of the Arabian Peninsula and that we abhor, frankly. But on the other hand, there are things that mean that our alliances are genuine and they can exist and forge forward. In fact, it also means that these countries are able to align themselves more comfortably with Israel than they are with Iran. Now, I have some questions about Jared Kushner, I admit, but when it comes to the Abraham Accords, in a way, it was a stroke of brilliance. The fact that we have people, that we have leaders from Israel and leaders from secular Arabia, secular Muslim countries in the Middle East coming together and acting as allies would have seemed like an absolute miracle 30, 40, 50 years ago, an impossibility. But now it's the reality, and it's a strong reality because the economic benefit to both sides of those accords is enormous, and it's a beautiful thing. Okay, so that is our news for the moment. We've got a couple other things to get into at the end of the show, and I'm looking forward to that. I apologize for the technical issues we were having. I so hope you have hung with us because we're only now getting into the meat of the program and really looking forward to spending our time with you and diving in deep into the issue of fraud. What is fraud? How does it come about? What does it mean? What does it mean for you? What does it mean in the context of an enormous case like Elon Musk versus Open AI? What does it mean in the context of national cases of fraud? And what does it mean in the context of your neighborhood? I once handled a case that involved the affinity fraud of hundreds of Amish people living in the state of Indiana. Now, before we dive into this, and this should go in our show notes as well, while I am an attorney and I do practice law in the state of Indiana, nothing I say here today is in the form of actual legal advice. We're going to outline some things. It's informational. Hopefully some of it's a bit like a classroom, but most of it's going to be sharing information that you can find valuable and dive in deeper for yourself. On the other hand, if there's a possibility of a case you know of or may have been involved with that we could be helpful with, we're going to invite you and encourage you to drop us a comment on it. And hopefully we can talk at some point and see if we're a match to work together on that. But the point of our show tonight, we want to spend some time talking about this incredible case. One of the largest private lawsuits in American history is going on in California, right around the San Francisco Bay, right around Silicon Valley, right as we sit here and talk together tonight. And let's get into that. So let's first look at each side's position, and we'll start with Elon Musk. Here goes.
How concerned is Sam Altman about annihilation, do you think?
I think in reality he's not concerned about it. I don't trust OpenAI. I started that company as a non-profit open source. The open in OpenAI, I named the company.
Yeah.
OpenAI as an open source. And it is now extremely closed source and maximizing profit. I don't understand how you actually go from being an open source non-profit to a closed source for maximum profit organization.
Well, but Sam Altman got rich, didn't he?
At various points he's claimed not to be getting rich, but he's claimed many things that were false. And now apparently he's going to get $10 billion of stock or something like that. I don't trust Sam Altman, and I don't think we want to have the most powerful AI in the world controlled by someone who is not trustworthy.
That seems like a fair concern.
Yeah.
But you don't think, as someone who knows him and has dealt with him, that he is worried about the possibility this could get out of control and hurt people?
He will say those words, but no.
Give us like the 10,000 foot version. What is the fundamental conflict between Elon Musk and his various allies, Meta being one of them, and you guys? Like, what is the disagreement fundamentally about?
Look, I don't live inside Elon's head, so this is a little bit of speculation. Elon definitely did a lot to help OpenAI in the early days, and in spite of all of this, I'm very grateful, and I think he's just a sort of legendary entrepreneur. He's also clearly a bully, and he's also someone who clearly likes to get in fights. You know, right now it's me. It's been Bezos, Gates, Zuckerberg, lots of other people. And I think fundamentally, this is about OpenAI is doing really well. Elon cares about doing really well. Elon started and now runs a very direct competitor that's trying to do exactly what OpenAI does. Everything we're doing, I believe Elon would be happy about if he weren't in control of the company. He left when he thought we were like on a trajectory to certainly fail. He also wouldn't do something where he had like total control over OpenAI. But I think it's like a little bit of a sideshow, and the right thing for us to do is just keep doing incredible research, keep shipping products people love, and most importantly, like keep pursuing this mission of AGI to benefit people and getting that out into the world.
Okay. So there you got a very brief outline from both gentlemen on their side of the argument. Now, I want to tee this up with the case history, but, a little bit of my own understanding of and look at both individuals. Yes, I mean, Elon Musk was involved with Doge at the beginning of Trump's new term in office, and was very much a fan of that. I think it's a very challenging process, and we'll talk more about fraud that affects the entire nation, and maybe there's a better way to go about it, and maybe we're finding that out right now. But I've liked Elon Musk for a long time. I've been an investor with Tesla. I'm a very small investor. Big fan of X and what they have done for free speech, in my opinion. Don't necessarily think it is absolutely the best platform, or that it delivers on everything that that Elon intended for it to, or perhaps claimed it would. But look, how can you watch a SpaceX launch? I mean, we all watched Artemis and NASA, which is fantastic. The government has monopoly on doing things like that if it chooses to right now, for better or worse. I mean, even Christopher Columbus, when he sailed to America, went to the King of Spain and got the resources before he came over. And frankly, Elon Musk does a lot of that as well. That said, if you look at what Elon Musk has done with SpaceX, or Starlink and the public offering that's coming. I mean, I just think he's a fascinating, amazing individual. Now, do I think he's perfect? By no means. I don't know that, overall his character is definitely, in other words, I think his character might be more trustworthy than Sam Altman, but, I don't know either of these gentlemen personally, and I don't know enough about them to make that kind of judgment. Sam Altman, on the other hand, is a person who comes across as very sincere, very kind of nerdy, studious, on the level, unthreatening, very unthreatening in his personality, in his persona. Never on the attack, but certainly behind closed doors, he's made some unbelievable deals and he's figured out how to do it. Sam Altman, to me, is a person, though, like Elon Musk says, who can't be trusted. Now, do I take Tucker Carlson at his word? And Tucker Carlson said nothing to impugn him, but Tucker was very critical in revealing some of the dubious issues in Sam Altman's private life. The mysterious death of one of his former employees that who was about to become a whistleblower. And what was that all about? I don't know. And I'm afraid, like many other crimes we don't know the answer to in America, we may not ever know what that was all about. And that gives me a lot of pause. And it gives me a lot of pause that he doesn't care whether or not we do know a lot more about it. So let's continue on and talk about the history of the case, and then we'll circle back. So again, I'm not here to impugn the character of Sam Altman at all. I think there are questions, and I think one of the big questions is about what is going to happen with AI. Is there the possibility of human annihilation? Is he concerned about that? That's a very real and fair question. Now, here's the thing that I think America has always had that no other country has, and that is a level of marketplace accountability. I think that ultimately all accountability on a human level, on the horizontal level, is found in the marketplace. Now, you can question that or nuance it or whatever, but the reality is, if you look at Sam Altman and his situation, where he's been and where he's going, he's ultimately surrounded by the Mark Zuckerbergs, the Bill Gates, the Jeff Bezos. And I say Bill Gates because he's largely out of Microsoft management now, from what we know. And certainly Elon Musk, who am I leaving out? The Anthropic team, and others that are, of course, Google and Gemini. So these are the power players in AI, not to mention the chip makers that power AI. And I think the next power player center coming up, there's got to be something around the management of the data centers. Of course, they all have plenty of money to build their own data centers, as Trump asked them to do. That's going to lead to kind of an environment where we had 30 years ago, if we think about the PC markets and how Microsoft and Apple took diametrically opposed approaches to winning that game, which Microsoft essentially went open source, if you will. Windows is everywhere. What they want to do is sell Windows, put it on everybody's computer, welcome everybody's apps and everything else into the environment. Samsung, of course, famously did the same thing with its cellular phones. And Apple stayed everything Apple for a long, long time. And even their moves away from it today are still somewhat limited. I bring that all up because when we look at the AI market, it's really interesting because on the one hand, with them building their own data centers, whether it's OpenAI or X or Google, whoever it is, Anthropic for sure, they will have their own data centers, but the way the LLMs talk to each other and learn from each other mean that to close the source is almost an impossibility. I don't really understand or know enough to say how genuine Elon's comments about closing up the source at OpenAI is realistically, but they've certainly tried in various ways, and we'll get to that in a moment. So now I want to really go into the history of how the case developed and how we got there. Okay, the preface, the pre-case story, the prehistory, is that in December of 2015, OpenAI was founded by Elon Musk, Sam Altman, and Greg Brockman, okay, as a nonprofit dedicated to developing artificial general intelligence for the benefit of humanity. Wow, what a amazing goal. Now, these are three men. I know very, very little about Greg Brockman. I'll confess here right now. But Elon Musk, I've heard him often talk about his thoughts about God. He once, was with a group of Christian podcasters and said that he agreed with what they said. And they said, wow, well, then you're a Christian and welcome to the family. Well, as I've heard him talk further with Joe Rogan and on other podcasts and elsewhere, I think he's much more of a skeptic. And I think there's a reason for that if you're Elon Musk. And, that's the shame of being so famous, so talented, and so wealthy, frankly, that you're always going to be a skeptic at best. I mean, I don't think anybody in that position can have come to a place where they really doubt that there's a God. They believe there is a God. But to accept that God is God and you're not, that they're the creator and you're a creature, is quite difficult when you are someone like Elon Musk. And I would say that same challenge is similar for Sam Altman. I think Sam Altman is just a general skeptic from what little I know of him. And also, his Jewish roots kind of reinforce that, right? I mean, I would say most Jewish people have some sensibility about God, but not a clear, defined belief in an actual being who is God. And it's interesting to me as a Christian, because if I look at the Old Testament and I look at the Jewish people of the Old Testament, how personalized God was to them. And then when Jesus came into their midst, they rejected the idea of a personality of God. And that's a long story for another live stream at another time. But Sam Altman is a skeptic, and he's confessed he's a skeptic, and he doesn't ponder theological things very deeply, except through the iterations in AI, whatever that means. Okay. Then in February of 2018, Elon Musk, as he is wont to do, rather abruptly left. Of course, Tesla was going through a lot at the time, rapid growth, and it had a string of months when the stock price increased constantly. And then a couple of years later, and I think, well, it's hard to say, he may have already had it in the works to buy out Twitter. Seemed like it was a rather sudden decision, but he'd been watching the market closely for a long time. What does that mean? I mean, it just means that February 18th, Elon Musk left OpenAI, and from the standpoint of that company, didn't look back. I think that it's important to consider X in that equation, because he bought Twitter. It did not have functioning chatbot. I mean, it didn't. And then he created Grok and came up with the name. I heard somebody call it Gronk today, maybe in one of our video clips, Grok. And it has become one of the top 5 large learning models, and it is a power driver for X. It's very good. It's very comparable to Gemini. Those are the two, I'll confess here, so you know my somewhat biases, that I use the most frequently. And sort of Gemini is my default, and I'll check it with Grok, and they both are imperfect. And I've seen that as you have seen yours. So Musk leaves, and he wanted to take control of OpenAI and was unable to. So he leaves in February 2018. Then in March of 2019, OpenAI creates a capped profit subsidiary, which is an entity that we would have something like a B Corp in Indiana, which is a public interest company where you can earn profits, but you have to demonstrate through your bylaws, through various other means, through audits, that you are serving a public good to do so. That's what OpenAI appeared to be doing in its own type of format. And that was at a stage where they're negotiating with Microsoft, a partnership with Microsoft, to license their AI exclusively to Microsoft. Now, the funny thing is that people will jump on ChatGPT and they'll never know the close ties they have with Microsoft, that Microsoft is providing a lot of the advancement and development of ChatGPT and all of its levels, GPT 2, 3, 4 now, and that Microsoft is licensed to use that, which means Copilot and ChatGPT are brother sister units. I mean, yeah, do they function exactly the same? I'm not going to tell you I know very well because I don't use either one of them. I've tried each of them. And I was very fascinated by ChatGPT when it first came out. And really nobody was using chatbots if you think back in 2019, even at the advent of COVID, even as we went into COVID, and it wasn't even COVID that stirred everybody to start using the chatbots. Frankly, it was a go-to-market strategies, primarily of OpenAI and Microsoft, followed not too far behind by Google. And that's when Elon and X eventually jumped in. Now, did Elon think that with the creation of Grok, he could overtake ChatGPT in the marketplace? Knowing Elon, he probably did. I mean, that was his goal. And he realized it was a tall order, especially since he was behind at least 2, probably 3 or 4 other players who were ahead of him in the development of chatbots and moving toward agentic AI, that he had a high hill to climb. And frankly, with Tesla, with SpaceX, he has not, it was certainly not with Starlink, had the level of competition. I mean, he's been first in the game. He has built the moat just by being first to conquer an idea that a lot of other people had. I mean, I can remember back in the 1980 presidential campaign, how Jack Kemp made one of his primary campaign planks creating tax credits for the development of electric vehicles. And so Congressman Kemp, Secretary Kemp, who passed away many years ago and didn't get to see this evolution in electric vehicles, was pushing it at least 30 years ahead of its time. So it's not like these ideas weren't there. It's not like even the idea around AI and probably even chatbots wasn't present for a long time, but nobody was taking it to market. In 2022, I sampled ChatGPT, and it was late 2022, I think November perhaps of 2022 for the first time. And it was a baby then, frankly. And in 2023, it started to evolve and tons of people were using it. And by the end of 2024, by the time Trump took office, everybody was using it. Now you think about that and you think about this, the wars that are going on in our midst over rare earth minerals, over the chip competition, the extraordinary gains in the stock market. I mean, I don't think people recognize the differences between the chip makers in AI, for example, and the crypto craze of 5 or 10 years ago. Things have changed dramatically in our world because of AI, and they've changed very rapidly, and they're going to continue to change. Now, I am a never-ending optimist. I'm a never-ending optimist with my own skepticisms, with my own doubts and questions. I'm also a lawyer and an investigator. And so I believe through proofs, through various kinds of proofs. And I know that there is virtually no proof human beings can wrap their arms around that is 100% or can be conveyed at least 100% to other people. But we're learning, and that's the problem with fraud cases. Okay, so let's dive into the case itself. In February 2024, as the chatbot craze was unfolding very rapidly, Elon brought suit against OpenAI in San Francisco, alleging a breach of contract and a betrayal of an original founding agreement. Now, his theories were quite creative, and in the opening video, the gentleman referred to, I don't think this theory will stand on a breach of contract, and it actually didn't, neither in the first round nor the second. Now, whether it should have or not is another question. I think the way that it was pled, it did make it very challenging because Elon, perhaps out of pride, perhaps out of legal advice, perhaps other reasons, I don't know, pled that breach of contract as a founding agreement. Actually, I think that if he had pled it as a donor agreement or as an agreement, a director's agreement of some sort, rather than a founding agreement, that it may have still been part of the case. We may be arguing that. They may be arguing that at trial in a couple of weeks. But he pled it the way he did. And in June of 2024, on the eve of going to court over a motion to dismiss the case for failing to plead a breach of contract claim that on which he could recover as a matter of law, he withdrew the suit and it was dead. Well, it was only 2 months later, this kind of activity was spinning and never going away. He refiled, and this time he included fraud, violations of racketeering laws, RICO, and he spun the breach of contract claims around to include quasi-contract and other things. So with that, I think that we should, where are we at here? Take a look at our next clip.
So in a filing on Tuesday, Elon Musk's lawyers asked to have CEO Sam Altman and president of that company, Greg Brockman, removed from their roles at OpenAI. As a legal remedy, they now ask to strip those executives of what they call authority and personal financial benefits they extracted from OpenAI's illicit for-profit operations and conversion. The backdrop here, Kelly, Musk sued OpenAI, which he also co-founded, alleging that he was manipulated and deceived after OpenAI explored converting to a for-profit. Jury selection for that trial kicks off in a few weeks here in San Francisco, and Musk is now seeking more than $100 billion in damages from OpenAI, and co-defendant Microsoft now says he would actually return what he calls ill-gotten gains to OpenAI's nonprofit arm. It does come just a day after OpenAI penned a letter to the California and Delaware attorneys general accusing Musk of anti-competitive behavior, including possible collusion between the Tesla CEO and Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg. This all has to do with text messages where Musk asked Zuckerberg for help acquiring OpenAI. Meta had already sided with Musk in this fight, sent a letter to the California AG a couple of years ago asking to block the company's for-profit conversion. Musk left OpenAI back in 2018 after trying to merge that company with Tesla. later launched xAI, which now competes directly with Altman's firm. And then that firm recently merged with SpaceX. The drama, Kelly, comes as OpenAI and Musk SpaceX look to go public in record listings expected this year.
So, first of all, I need to apologize for, maybe I need to apologize to Mark Zuckerberg for omitting him from the conversation. Yes, he is one of the key players who should be included, one of the tech moguls. I mean, really, you can look at the Mag 7 companies. That's, what is it? NVIDIA, Facebook, Tesla, Google, Apple, Amazon, and I'm sorry, who am I leaving out? It used to be Netflix and the FANG, but now that we have 7 companies, forgive me for missing whoever I missed again. But in a few years, if Musk doesn't win this suit, plan on OpenAI being in the Mag 8 or the Elite 8, whatever it's called at that time. So that was a very complicated video, and I'm tempted to go back and watch it again. But if you're confused, I'm afraid I might even confuse you more. So instead of doing that, I'm going to try to unravel it a bit. The last Tuesday she was speaking of was not today, but last Tuesday, actually. Musk made a huge pivot in the case. And what was that pivot all about? Okay, so if we go back to January of this past year, Musk lost sorry, I just got really big there. But Musk lost a summary judgment on a breach of contract claim, but several of his claims survived. And those claims that survived included this, included the fraud, included the RICO claims, and others, and included the promissory estoppel claims on what he would have had. And this is all going to go to a jury. And while fraud itself is incredibly difficult to prove, what is not so difficult is the quasi contract. If on the promissory estoppel, if he can prove certain elements that there were benefits conferred upon OpenAI and that it was unjust enrichment to them, those claims have a way of getting through the judge. I mean, they already have gotten through the judge. And when they get to the jury, the juries are very sympathetic to that type of claim. And that's where a lot of money is on the table. Well, was on the table. Now there's a lot of money that's no longer on the table. There's a ton that's been taken off, and that is the ton of money that's been taken off the table is the 134 billion. And I'm sorry, we've had some technical challenges tonight. We're trying a new and different way of making our transitions, and it's been a lot more difficult than I knew it would be, and my production team has understood. We will have that worked out by the next time we go live, which may be sooner than originally planned, just so we can prove we're getting it right. But thank you all that are sticking with me. I hope there's a ton of you on board even now, and I hope we get a ton more that pick up later. So at any rate, Elon Musk took the $134 billion he was asking for it to be awarded to him and said, if the court decides that the claim will go back, okay, I'm going to ask my team to not play around with the scenes too much, because we're having a hard time keeping everybody focused here. So with that, the 134 billion that Elon was asking for, he took off the table, and his demand now is that the court rule that the company should be reduced back to a nonprofit company. The court should order that the for-profit enterprise cease business, terminate, and be returned to a for-profit entity. I think a lot of people are going to see that as fair. Now, the interesting question is the judge has now said that the case may be bifurcated and the claims of fraud and unjust enrichment may go to the jury on the 27th if they don't get settled, and that the claims of, and I don't know what would happen if those claims are decided, there are damages awarded, but OpenAI is not a nonprofit yet. Do they get their money back if the judge doesn't rule that they have to operate as a nonprofit? It's going to be really interesting. If the case is bifurcated, okay, there will be a damages trial starting on the 27th. It will go for weeks. And when that's decided and over, then it's likely that the judge, I don't know in California whether there will be a jury involved in these equitable claims about dissolving the for-profit entity. It could just go before the judge, and that could happen as early as this summer. So it's complicated. It's a little confusing. It's challenging, and it's very, very interesting. The implications are one of the things that I find most helpful, valuable, and important for all of us. We all want to hear about what's going to come out of this case. What's it going to mean to you? If Elon Musk wins outright, okay, OpenAI goes back to nonprofit status, I want to say that is going to be a big win for the public. However, I caution with no nonprofit in history has ever become a leader in advancement and innovation. I mean, there are plenty that do well and do much good work. I worked for the American Cancer Society for many years, and it was a great funder of good things. For-profit companies don't always operate as much based on shareholder investment and shareholder returns as they would seem, however. And that should be the distinction from a nonprofit company, right? So a nonprofit company operates theoretically for the benefit of all its constituents based on board of directors guidance, and it is funded by investors who are not going to receive their a profit on their investment. For-profit companies, conversely, are acting in the best interests of their customers and their shareholders. Those are the constituents. And if the shareholder happens to be one person, or if one person owns 15% of $1 trillion company, a lot of that interest is him or her. But nonprofit companies are hamstrung and handicapped in certain ways, and they do not have the profit motive to succeed directly in front of them. We've seen how in the healthcare world, from the American Cancer Society, the NIH, various government-funded entities that work to advance drug development, that they can profit handsomely and they can innovate incredibly. And it may or may not be in the public interest how they go about it. So it'll be really interesting. I say that. I do think it is a win if OpenAI doesn't remain a public company. I think it's a win in part because of all the consolidated interest. I cannot imagine, if you go to the All In podcast, and I will be listening to it the next week, the investments that have already been made in OpenAI by private individuals seeking profit, power, and control is enormous. And that's across the board. That's all the other Mag 7 companies. What are we doing here? Now we got actually, this is, I think, is a camera issue. Anyway, I'll just keep talking. I'm sorry I'm a bit remote and we've got things in front of us, but Yeah, we're doing the best we can, folks. And I apologize. I promise you we're going to have this worked out before we come back next time. That said, okay, I think it's a big win if OpenAI, but we're not going to know that right away. And we shouldn't, frankly. And here's why. Because Elon just made this filing and changed his whole position on damages and equity and what would happen with OpenAI just 3 weeks before the trial. I'm sure he did that after having much jury research done and having private jury pools polled to see how they saw the case. And, you know, what they apparently were finding was award Elon Musk $100 and some billion. You got to be kidding, right? That money should go somewhere other than Elon Musk. And you know, that would be the biggest conversation that would come out of any jury room. So Elon makes this amendment to his pleadings a few weeks before trial. Of course, the judge on something this large, of course, the judge is going to continue at least the part of the trial that addresses those issues, and it will be heard later. Now, on the damages side, I don't know that it matters that much to either side. I'm sure that just as it was very frustrating to Mark Zuckerberg a few weeks ago to have one 9-figure judgment verdict entered against him, on the same day, I believe, he had a $2 million verdict against him. And perhaps the $2 million verdict hurt more than the much larger one. I'm not sure that either of these individuals care that much about the money involved in this case. It's jury money. It's almost like play money. And $100 billion would feed a lot of people. And I want to talk about that in just a minute. So the implications are maybe there's a net win. Either way, what I hope comes out of it is a decision that the court will demand and require much more transparencies from all of these companies. That is an essential element of what we need from AI. AI is a danger, I think, primarily because a few people can determine where it goes. And the machines will have more ability to do that on their own because there is less accountability. So I really hope that's what comes out of this case. If it returns to a nonprofit company and Sam Altman there are things exposed about the practices of OpenAI that we all should know about, that will be a major win for all of us. And I hope that comes out at the first tier of the trial starting April 27th. Okay, with that, let's take a quick look at a summary and take from other people looking at this case.
Lawsuit.
I'm sympathetic to this one. Like, I think that, like, you know, abstracting away, like, I don't think he's going to win, you know? Like, I don't think that, like, there was a contract, and I think, like, the legal theory here is dubious. But I look at this as, like, not a piece of strategy or whatever. I look at it as, like, he donated tens of millions of dollars to a nonprofit that is now an $86 billion startup that's raising money and commercializing stuff for Microsoft. And he's like, well, how did that work? Like, I think that's a very...
So... yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly. I think professionals, I think people working in independent journalism, I think that the marketplace as a whole, I think if you've got 12 jurors sitting in a room, they're all going to have a similar take on the case, right? How did that work? How did OpenAI become the company it is? And how do you attack it for what it's done? I mean, no doubt there are prohibitions on the type of transition that OpenAI has made, but they haven't risen to the criminal level, apparently. And, you know, let's see how this case comes out. It's very interesting. It will have extraordinary ramifications for our culture and our economy going forward. So pay close attention. Now, with that, there's other fraud going on around, and it's all over the United States. So beginning in January, we saw this. What was last count was $90 billion in one state, a small state, Minnesota, over empty child care centers. Okay. $90 billion lost and unaccounted for in Minnesota. Then you've got California and the hospice and adult care fraud, which is probably even larger, quite a bit larger. Actually, even the governor announced, I believe, that they had sourced $247 billion in unaccounted for government funds related to hospice, adult daycare, and I believe childcare was included. And all this is going through their versions of their Health and Human Services. The more money we spend, the more tax dollars they have, the more that's granted to them by the federal government, the more money there is to waste and abuse. And the process to get there is fraud. Let's take a look at the guy who's uncovered a lot of this, Nick Shirley, and how he went about it.
Last Thursday, Elon Musk sued Sam Altman, the co-founder of OpenAI, that's the creator of ChatGPT, claiming that he breached his contract by pursuing profit.
No. Don't go there. Okay. So, well, we were going to look at that. Let's look at what he uncovered in Minnesota. Then the next video clip, please.
When these people have these home healthcare companies, you're seeing them everywhere inside this building. What kind of fraud are they committing?
So there's false documentation being submitted to the state of Minnesota for services never provided. They're having forms signed in advance for services that were then never rendered. As far as a year or 2 years in advance, they'll have someone sign these forms at one sitting, and then they just file those with the state of Minnesota, and nobody from the state of Minnesota bothers to check that those services were ever provided.
So they're essentially just using people saying that they had these services provided months or even years ago, then filing the paperwork and then receiving money from the government.
Right, and the Somali community is a very closed community, so everybody's in on it, and they don't want to talk, as you can see.
And for this building, I'm going to give an estimate of around $30 million for how much fraud is taking place. That is a very low estimate. However, still a lot of money in fraud. And do you think there is fraud taking place here?
I don't know. Yeah.
Do you have any idea what any of these businesses are doing?
I never ask.
Wow. Well, I mean, could we expect the person in his shoes to have asked that question? No, really, realistically, probably not. But there was a lot going on in there, and a lot of people knew about it. You can't have drug dealers, you can't have contraband going through the building where you live, especially if it's, in apartments that are set up with office space and little apartment spaces alongside, without knowing that something is going on there. Don't blame him at all, unless he's part of the fraud, and I have no evidence that he is. But what I do blame is any state, any locality that would allow a building to operate 22 daycare centers that have no kids in them in the same building. And this is going on all over. Folks, the reality is we got to get a handle on this. We're being fleeced, and we're being fleeced in so many ways. And actually, there's a reason for it. And it's because we've become so incredibly naive about what particularly one party, the Democrats. Look, the governor of Minnesota is Tim Walz. The governor of California is Gavin Newsom. Where's the fraud? Next up, they're investigating Pritzker in Illinois, another Democrat. Massachusetts, New York. The blue states have so much incredible fraud. And I'm not talking about thousands of dollars or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're talking about millions and billions of dollars. And just think about the consequences of all that is being done and happened. And all that was financed because you believe something good was going to come out of it. And you voted for the people who promised you that something good was going to come out of it. Did it make your life better? Did anything they've done make your life better? When you look at Eric Swalwell, when you look at the makeup of Congress, do you think that all these people who have promised you a cleaner climate, they promised you redistribution so that the rich aren't going to get richer and your life is going to be better off, are they doing anything good? Well, they are for some people. And that's the beneficiaries, the people that are receiving the money. Immigrants that come in from other countries without visas, without legitimate credentials, and stay here in community and receive this money by the hundreds of thousands. I've seen it in suburban neighborhoods where people move in that literally came out of ghetto neighborhoods weeks or months before, and they're putting up $100,000 solar panel systems on top of their houses. They're driving Bentleys. They're living life large. And this was all going on during the Biden administration. And it was quite intentional. Okay. There is no doubt in my mind that there are two political parties that have power, that have every seat in Congress, the White House, and have appointed every justice in the federal bench. And from those two parties, we have one party that is highly imperfect and can be doubted on many levels. And then we have another party that is devoutly committed to taking your money and spending it for themselves. Folks, follow the stories around Eric Swalwell. Understand how this came about. Think about a person who lived her life as a very devoted Democrat, giving as much money as she could to these important and wonderful causes, the LBGTQIAA, MXC, whatever community, because that's the way in Canada they perceive it now. You just string together the alphabet and say what they are. For transgender surgeries, for men playing in women's sports. Are you kidding me? Unbelievable. For men in women's bathrooms, for 20 million people coming across our borders illegally. This has all happened in our midst. And there was a woman who was married to one of the founders of Google and got heavily into politics, so heavily that when RFK Jr. ran for president as an independent candidate, when he announced his run, he announced her as his running mate. And that's Nicole Shanahan. And if you don't take it from me, I don't blame you. You shouldn't. But I think you should take it from her, especially if you're female and especially if you come from means and a good education. Let's take a look at how Nicole Shanahan understands this process.
But what happened around the pandemic is that this whole other segment, what I don't think many of the tech mafia wives realize is that they were used to set the groundwork for what was called like the reset, what is called generally as like the reset by the Klaus Schwabs,
like
of
the
world.
Great Reset.
The Great Reset. Yeah. They openly talk about this Great Reset.
Yeah.
So the tech wife mafias, I believe, were kind of being conscripted in many ways, and their money especially was being conscripted in to set the groundwork for the Great Reset.
Yeah.
I strongly encourage you to watch the rest of that interview on Allie Beth Stuckey's Relatable. Frankly, I like Allie Beth Stuckey. I'm not a big fan, but I thought that was an unbelievably fantastic interview. Look, Nicole Shanahan is a human being. What I love about her is her level of genuine self-awareness. She sees where she made mistakes, where she was going wrong, where she was taken advantage of, and she owns up to it and admits it instead of doubling down on it. She also sees the folly and the Trump derangement syndrome that's out there. Look, the Democrats have one issue to work on, one plank, and that's Donald Trump. And that's people don't like the things he says and does. He attacks the Pope, he attacks everybody, and his character, especially on things he says and does in public, is really frankly questionable. But the things that he does are amazingly in line with America's best interest and what will truly make America great again. That is why the team of Donald Trump, who can doubt that Elon Musk, the things that he's done have made great strides and improvement for the world. Now, is it always going to be, the best? Is it best that we have so many satellites in space? Only God can really answer that question. But I can tell you that we all live better and our economy operates at a higher level. Food is more sustainable. Remember that when power has been out in various countries around the world, Elon Musk has given citizens of those countries free access to Starlink so they could still have internet. I mean, that's an amazing thing. So whether, Elon has a perfect heart, he doesn't. By his innovation and by his striving for what's next and better in the higher frontier, he has done good things. And Donald Trump, frankly, operates very similarly. America is a better, stronger country, even though you may not see it right now. You may have questions about the war. You may have questions about many other things. But as it turns out, even on the Epstein files, I'm beginning to think the guy was right. I didn't like the way he said it. And I'm not saying that don't get me wrong here. I mean, Jeffrey Epstein was the epitome of evil. I mean, he truly was. And the people that surrounded him had the evil in their hearts spilling over and coming out and doing the most atrocious human acts ever done. And there's still things. I mean, we still have hundreds of thousands of children missing in the United States that haven't been accounted for. And Nicole Shanahan now sees the folly of what she was doing and supporting, along with Mackenzie Bezos, along with Melinda Gates. These women and their good-hearted intentions all working together were serving an evil process. They were empowering people like Eric Swalwell, and it had to change, and it is changing, and we've got to be the engine. Freedom is never more than one generation from being lost. We've got to keep carrying the torch. We've got to work for it day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year. God has given us our time to function and operate, and we have to do that. Okay, so back to fraud for a few minutes. I want to talk to you about private fraud cases and how what we've talked about today may be able to help you personally. So let's get into that. Let's talk about proving fraud.
You're a person who has investigated a lot of mortgage fraud, so we wanted to get your expertise here.
It's an intentional misrepresentation of facts to induce somebody else to take an action that they wouldn't have otherwise taken. You have to show the person's intent was to defraud, to misrepresent in order to induce some sort of benefit back to them. That becomes difficult when you're just looking at a file.
Yeah, that's true. And having handled dozens of fraud cases in my career, a lot of them settle. And a lot of the ones that settle are the ones where there really was fraud. The ones that don't settle, even if there was, it's tough to prove, because how do you get into somebody's head? And the fact is, you only have circumstantial evidence. You have to prove it via implication. So remember I said a little while ago that proof is never 100% certain in the human experience. Okay. I mean, that is the thing you have to remind people of. It's like proving reasonable doubt in a criminal trial. The difference is the jury is not going to give a plaintiff the same kind of benefit of the doubt. It's going to give the prosecutor the flag and mom and apple pie when a criminal is on trial. When that happens, even though the prosecutor is tasked with proving a defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, he goes in with the jury that probably has a presumption that even while they're carrying a presumption of innocence of the defendant in the jury room with them, doesn't mean they can't take other presumptions. And the vast majority of jurors carry a presumption that the prosecutor didn't bring a case against someone who wasn't guilty of what they did. So that's a challenge. But in a fraud case, when they walk in that jury room, that plaintiff, well, he's not the prosecutor. He doesn't have the flag waving behind him, or she, or the whole family, or a whole group of people like the Amish community I spoke of earlier. He has a challenge to prove that that defendant really intentionally misled the other party. And so that is a huge challenge. Okay. And that applies whether we're talking about a mortgage case, which I've done a lot of, or if we're talking about any other kind of fraud. And I don't care if it's securities fraud, which is very common, contract fraud, which is also quite common, real estate fraud of other kinds. It happens. It's all over the place. One of the biggest ones, as we know, is cyber fraud. These pig slaughtering scams that are out there. They call from a person who wants to be your friend. Maybe it's from a dating site and they want to establish a relationship. And they build that entirely over the phone, very, very creatively, and well-spoken English and good conversation, very empathetic. And what they do is they get you to open up a cybersecurities account. Okay, you go and you open a wallet and you deposit some money, and guess what? Next day you've made more money on it, and that's it. And then you've started down the slippery slope. They have tricked you in, and then they get you to invest every dime you have, and the next day it's gone. It's no longer in the account. You can't find it. You can't prove it. You can't track them down. There are ways to do it. And if you've got a case, love to talk to you about it and share with you what we've done. And I'm going to tell you, your probabilities are low, but at least they're not impossible if you pursue it. But you've got to put more resources, and you may have lost all your resources to do that. Okay. So next, let's talk about fraud recovery. What do you get if you actually do prove fraud?
Can a wire transfer be reversed? Today, wire transfers are common in real estate transactions. However, reversing a wire transfer isn't always easy. In cases of fraud, criminals move money quickly from account to account, so you need to be ready to act. If you need to reverse a fraudulent wire transfer, follow these steps. First, contact the banks involved to initiate a wire recall. Next, file a report with law enforcement. This includes the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center and your local law enforcement. Next, alert your insurance carrier if you have a policy that covers wire fraud. Finally, warn your security or IT department of any potential system compromise. You'll then need to work closely with your bank and law enforcement. While a full recovery is possible, it can be difficult. Remember, fraud happens when you least expect it, so it's important to be prepared. You can also use Certified's unique wire fraud prevention software to help you spot fraud and avoid it in the first place. For more fraud prevention tips, follow us and subscribe.
I'm sorry, I jumped a little bit ahead of myself there on the type of recovery I was talking about, but Mark, clip that video, watch it, and take notes, because that's exactly what you need to do if you are scammed. The reality is you might take your chances of recovery from 0% to maybe as much as 5% and not much more. But you better do that if you want to have any chance. And it can apply to cases of less egregious, if you will, if there is such a thing as less egregious fraud, where there's less money involved, or the acts were not so clearly intentional and designed in a scheme to defraud you. Okay, so now I want to talk about investment fraud and some of the cases that have been decided on around investment fraud. And let's jump there really quick if we can pull that clip up. There it is. Great. Thank you. Okay. Top 10 investment fraud cases. And there are some huge ones. Did you know, anybody remember Theranos? Theranos was only number 10. It was $600 million. Elizabeth Holmes, I believe, is still in jail and ordered to pay $450 million in restitution out of a total $600 million loss. That was number 10. Some other big cases that you might have heard of. Tyco, anybody remember that case just from a couple years ago? Resulted in Dennis Kozlowski being sentenced to 25 years in prison. And then in the Wirecard fraud case in Europe, that was, and it's still an ongoing trial, but there are $5 billion in losses estimated in that case. Then there was Sam Bankman-Fried and the FTX scam on cryptocurrencies, $8 billion. He was sentenced to 25 years in jail and in 2022. Waste management, these are all very recent and they're huge. Bernie Madoff, though, was the third largest in history, $65 billion over approximately 40 years, if you remember Bernie Madoff. These are huge, and so it's always out there. At the same time, we had the Enron scandal with Kenneth Lay and Jeffrey Skilling, $74 billion, the biggest fraud in history. Bernard Ebbers and $175 billion on the WorldCom scandal in the wake of Enron. So those are your 10 biggest. We're going to wrap up here in a few minutes, so I want to move ahead to our last couple of clips if we can. And before we close tonight, I want to talk with you about another political issue for a moment. If we can jump over there to what's going on in New Mexico.
The Democrats are in a free fall. 7 months out from the 2026 midterms, the party that once dreamed of a permanent blue majority is staring at poll numbers so catastrophic that even their own operatives are calling it a nightmare. So over the last century, the party in power, the party that has the White House, has lost seats in every single midterm for the exception of 3, 1934, 1998, and 2002. That's it. Otherwise, the party in power loses seats, and it's an average of just over 20 seats lost. Now, it gets worse. Rasmussen has Trump's latest job approval as of today at 47%, which, given the radical partisan divide in the country,
Oh, here I am. Okay, there's a lot more on that. I want to go to the last clip on about from Michael Smerkamish. So if we can get there, that would be fantastic.
On February 26, another meeting in the Situation Room ensued. And during the course of an hour and a half, the president said he, quote, wanted to go around the table and hear everyone's views. Vance repeated that an attack on Iran was a bad idea, but that he'd support the president's position. After CIA Director Ratcliffe discussed the stunning intel that the Iranian leadership was about to gather above ground in broad daylight at the Ayatollah's compound, the White House counsel David Warrington offered the opinion that the plan being presented to the president was legally permissible. General Kane told Trump he needed to decide by 4 p.m. the following day. Aboard Air Force One the next afternoon, 22 minutes before Kane's deadline, Trump gave the order. Operation Epic Fury is approved. No aborts. Good luck.
Okay, sorry for that delay. Back with you, and we're going to wrap up for the night. We got a couple things in there at the end, a little bit rushed and a little bit thrown together. I apologize for that. We're still working out the bugs, folks, and we appreciate you joining us. The first clip was Stephen Turley. the reality check is we don't know what's going to happen. What's happened in New Mexico is actually there's been increasing registrations in favor of Republicans. And, the news that you hear on CNN, NBC, et cetera, is maybe not the picture of everything that's going on in the country right now. But, the reality is I would expect if the election was held last week that it would have been a complete landslide in favor of the Democrats. I frankly would have. I watched what happened in Hungary with Viktor Orban losing. And, I think on the political spectrum, he's so close to Trump, we could expect a similar result here. However, a few things have changed with the war and with Eric Swalwell. And I think there's just a knowledge that is coming out with people. The economy is picking up. It's going to pick up more. So, and I think the Democrats really are in free fall because of their own party problems that they don't have any way to get out of. So it'll be interesting. Yes, I do think that the House of Representatives is very much in jeopardy for the Republicans. I would still be very pleasantly surprised if the Republicans could hold on to the majority there. The Senate, I don't really think it's hard for me to imagine. It would be a true landslide if the Democrats were able to win, a few red states, along with a couple swing states. And those red states would be places like Texas, Iowa, Ohio, Alaska. And they realistically have to win two of those, plus win Maine and Georgia, and hold on to seats in places like Michigan, Georgia, and what's the other state where they New Hampshire, in order to win. That's a very, very tall order. I just don't think they're going to win Ohio and Texas, or, Ohio, Texas, Iowa. I don't think they'll win any of those. It would be very surprising. And I think it'll be a big challenge for them to win in Alaska as well. So I think it's we'll see what happens. I think the cards still favor the Democrats for sure, but the net polling differentials between party approval and disapproval are actually better for Republicans and Democrats. All that says to me, look, there's a good case to be made for replacing the Republicans in Congress. There is, but the Democrats aren't making it. They're not even coming close. They're not even on the map right now. And if they want to win, that should change for them. We'll see what happens again. Okay. And then the final thought is you've got even people like Michael Smerconish, who has been a Republican virtually his entire life, joined the MSNBC Never Trumper lineup when Trump became president the first time, and has stuck to his anti-Trump line for most of the last 10 years. I think he has done it in a more honest and less, self defeating way than most of the Never Trump lineup has done. But what he has to say about Trump is exactly right. The madness is his method. And he's not only right about that, he's right about the idea that it doesn't have to be the method. He's already proved that his unpredictability is a bit of a power play, but does he have to do it by alienating so many people? Now Trump is going to have 2 years left in his last term in office. He's got one chance to really make America great again, one chance to do the best thing possible for America by not just winning wars and improving the economy, but really bringing the American people together in terms of believing in our country and believing in the ability to get along with each other. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. May God bless and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you, be gracious to you, lift up his countenance upon you, and give you peace. God bless.